Good evening, everybody. This is Cinnamon Noir.
And this is the Ramen Shaman.
Welcome back to Kero Blaster, Overtime Mode. Here we are in White Laboratories, which actually looks very different from the original. And in addition to the aesthetics, you may have noticed one huge difference, which is there is no floor in the vast majority of this level now. We are starting to run across those really tight jumps that I mentioned in the last video.
Also, lasers.
Yeah, those were in the original, though. However, now that you have less space to maneuver, they become a bit more of a problem.
Yeah. I kind of remembered them from the original, but...
Yeah, but this is something a little special. Be careful with these guys. They're totally harmless, but they can push you off the edge if you're not paying attention. Because they go over both sides of the cliff. They actually start appearing a lot from here on out. You may have noticed them in level 2, when we could jump on them over the mud. In general, they act as platforms for us when we have difficult stuff. Which is funny. They're one of the few benign enemy-style characters in this whole game. There really aren't any NPCs, but if they were, they would be one. Oh, bad move. Anyway, so this is a little different from the trap that we saw in the first game. In this one, these wheels are actually going to roll toward us, and instead of jumping up onto a platform, we have to do a pretty tight platforming jump between them. You also can just totally ignore this. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting. This is a little embarrassing. I actually played through this level once before starting the recording, and I didn't realize that the trap does not reset. So sorry for my idiocy just then. That's actually the trap the way it looks like after it goes through. In order to get through, you do need to spring that trap. The two wheels will roll toward you, and you need to do a jetpack jump in the middle of them.
Oh well.
Anyway, you'll see for yourself if you play this game.
Yeah, give people something to,
Yeah, it's a mystery. It was totally intentional. You may have noticed those little wheel guys, the ones that are orange. They look the way that the enemies from Pink Heaven did. I don't know if you noticed that. It's
Interesting.
I don't know what it means, if it means anything.
I probably would have had I been paying more
Zangyo
attention.
mode was developed after Pink Heaven, though, actually. This is something that was not in the game originally. Zangyo mode dates to 2015, whereas the original game was made in 2014. So that's something that's a little different. You know, in terms of development structure, that was bad. The original game was developed first, then Pink Hour was developed as a demo for it, then Zangyo mode and Pink Heaven were made at pretty much the same time. Pink Heaven was made in part to sort of remind people that this game existed and get them ready for Overtime mode. And the two have some similarities. Anyway, we're running into a new kind of laser guy here, which is weird because these guys are actually easier than their counterparts. Instead of shooting only horizontally, they shoot only vertically.
Interesting.
But that's actually easier to avoid because, you know, you do a lot more horizontal movement in this game than vertical movement. So it's kind of odd. Later, though, when they're used in conjunction with the horizontal enemies, we'll see that that's a lot more difficult.
Oh yeah, that sounds pretty bad.
Another big change here is we're starting to see 2 sets of moving platforms instead of 1, with like bigger distances between each. That makes this section a lot more difficult.
Oh boy.
This is kind of a tricky jump you need to do to get some bonus stuff. I failed that jump a lot in my first run through Overtime mode. One of those cases where, you know, you kind of waste too many lives in order to get something.
Yeah.
But this is one of few cases where I embarrassed myself off-screen so that I didn't have to on-screen, rather than vice versa. Anyway, these little vats of chemicals have an interesting pattern. Oh.
Ow.
Speaking of embarrassing myself on screen. So the blue ones, one will come at you very briefly, and then there'll be a sequence of 4. Meanwhile, the orange ones on the bottom come out in a more regular pattern. Just one at a time. What that means is you have to alternate between long jumps with jetpack and tiny hops to get over these blue ones and get back on your orange one, which is technically your main ride.
Yeah, that's... wow.
Yeah, that concept of making precise hops is going to be a lot more important in the next level, as we'll soon see.
That's kind of rough.
Yeah, it is. Speaking of rough, we have a mini-boss here.
This guy wasn't here before, was he?
No, he was not.
That's cool, though.
I love this enemy. He's kind of fun. We faced enemies kind of like this in the first game, but they were really easy. They were basically just walking treasure chests. This guy, on the other hand, has some tricky moves. For instance, if he hits you with that slam, he will insta-kill you, smashing you against the wall. He can also smash you against the ceiling. This guy replaces the enemy we had in the first playthrough, which was a mole. This is one of the few cases in the game where an enemy is actually replaced with a totally different one, instead of a variation on the original boss. That gets more and more common as we go through the game, though. So I decided to go ahead and get the laser here. Laser's very useful against the boss of this area. And I'm starting to think that I might actually grind here as well. Oh god, it's embarrassing. I do too much grinding here. But the alternative is watching me die again and again. You know, it's sort of pick your poison. How are you going to be bored? It's a great advertisement for my Let's Plays. Choose the way, you'll be bored.
Or you can watch my Dark Souls Let's Plays and get both.
Ooh.
Actually, I don't think I do much grinding.
6 self-burn, bro.
Best kind.
Yeah, self-burns are better than every other kind of burn. The British understand that.
Intentional self-burns, yes.
Yes. So, we were talking earlier about precision jetpack mechanics. Here's where knowing how to get around in your jetpack is very important, to get through these 2 different conveyors. Now, in the original game, it was a series of horizontal conveyors mixed with platforms. Here, the platforms are a lot sparser, and you choose between 2 vertical platforms. A little more complicated. Especially since getting between these 2, if you try to do that, can be very difficult. Requires some precise... I keep saying precision. Requires some technique, is what I meant to say. I'm starting to overuse certain words. You'll notice here I'm missing the jumps between these 2 a lot. It's because you have to sort of get a bead on the ones, especially when one of them's going up. I run into the side of that one a lot. That's going to become a much bigger deal in the next level when... and I was not paying attention there. I was too busy trying to get that mole.
Getting squashed against the ceiling.
Yeah.
How many games is that concept been in?
A lot, actually.
I can't imagine a lot.
Mario would kill you in many cases if you got smushed against something that was immobile.
I was remembering it from Sen's Fortress, Dark Souls 1.
Yeah. That is a nasty location.
Yeah.
Quite a few traps.
To be fair, well, no. What I don't like about it is there's some parts that are... There's one part that's kind of easy to screw up because you tend to accidentally jump when you mean to roll.
Yeah. I mean, I like traps. I think they're fun. But they can go too far, certainly.
I don't know. I do think the area was kind of cool. I'll admit that.
So, in this level, you start having to get past these bomb blocks. Earlier we had the option of breaking them, but you didn't really have to. Now you're starting to have to break through them. Oh, by the way, here's the little baby version of the guy we just fought.
Aww.
You'll notice how easy he is compared with his bigger brother. So these things will generally move forward until they are hit by another flame or by an angled wall.
Wait, so why are you back? Oh.
I'm getting the heart. Combination of grinding and just deciding to backtrack once I'd gotten enough. That treasure chest was very decisive. I do think this is fairly important. I think I get down to 1 health on this upcoming boss. Could be wrong. We'll see.
Well, fair enough then.
In any case, those little green bombs in the glass containers, one of the most difficult things to avoid taking damage from, both in the original playthrough and this one. They're just very complicated. They add a huge damaging thing to the entire rest of the game, which is already very distracting. There's so much stuff in this game. So many sources of damage. Later bosses are going to take that to ridiculous extremes. We already saw a taste of that, though, at the final boss of the first playthrough, which, as you may have noticed, just filled the screen with stuff. I think, though I'm not sure, that sometimes these flames will cancel each other out if you can get them going in opposite directions, but that doesn't always happen. That's the reason why there's not more flames right now than you'd think there should be, based on how many bombs there were. Other than that, I can't make sense of it.
Oh god, this part. Yeah, you pretty much need the bubbles for this, don't you?
Yeah, that was also true in the original playthrough. This is where the bubbles really came in handy. And here, this is showing us sort of how those vertical ones can actually be somewhat difficult. Because as we saw them
Yeah.
earlier, by themselves, they're really nothing. But in tandem with the other guys, they're surprisingly deadly.
Well, in narrow spaces, too.
Exactly. The bubble is very good in narrow spaces, as is the the ninja thing that we had earlier. There we go. We managed to get rid of enough that we can get a foothold.
Really seems to be a lifesaver here.
The laser is also a good one. The laser is fast and powerful enough that if you what am I trying to say? If you if you have a direct line of sight to the enemy, then you will destroy them before they shoot out the laser, which is helpful. But you do have to make sure you're a straight line from them, which isn't always easy. So I'm down 1 heart, but I do have 5 lives, so I should be able to tackle the boss with full health. At least at some point.
Were those guys in the original?
No, they were not. This is a new enemy in hard mode. And you will grow to heartily dislike these enemies by the end of this playthrough, trust me.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I mean, already they're annoying, but they get way worse than annoying. Yeah, they're weird. They're like jumping computer monitors or TVs or I don't know what.
I can imagine the fan comes in handy against them.
Yeah, the quad shot.
Although I do like the way you just sort of hop under them.
Yeah, it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. This is a fun little area. You need to push on forward, and even when the tire drops right in front of you, you have to keep pushing on, because it'll basically bounce and hop just over you. On the other hand, if you get freaked out and try to move around in any other direction, you will probably get squished either by it or by the tire that's just behind you. So I thought that was a clever little section.
It is.
I like the wheel sections. I wish that more had been done with them. I mean, there's already a lot, but they really don't do much with them except in this level in both playthroughs. They're introduced in level 3, and then a lot more is done with them in level 4, and that's it. You know. I don't know why I decided to risk that. I could have just used the quad.
Oh, God.
Anyway, here's a rare occasion where you use that not to set off a trap, but just to, you know, let down some...
To bridge the gap.
Exactly.
That's really clever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it. Anyway, be careful of this guy. Don't get distracted. It has happened to me before. I speak from experience. So anyway, the armored truck, you may remember from the first game, he's a lot harder in this version.
Oh, God. Because you got the piles of work in the way.
That's one thing, although you can get rid of a number of them before you start. It's actually better to leave them there because you can use them as platforms to avoid the missiles. The real reason this is harder is because look at how many more missiles he's firing. This is at least twice as many per minute, per second, and I think actually it's more like 3 times as many.
Oh, yeah.
He also moves faster, and as we're going to see soon, he lets out more difficult enemies of this type. And more missiles in this section. Plus he has more health. Yeah, generally speaking, you want to slowly and carefully move backwards from his initial location. Because if you move too fast, kind of like sombreros, which we played earlier, actually. If you move too fast, you'll end up spacing the missiles too wide, and you'll have no space to run to.
Interesting.
You want to get them clustered as close together as possible. Here, I make a really stupid decision.
And
yet somehow I managed to
make
make through it.
there.
So did I while I was playing this game. It's like a higher power was watching over me, because I managed to actually beat this boss on the first try. Lucky me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you came really close there.
What can I say? Sometimes luck's on your side. Anyway, we get fire, which I actually did not fully appreciate the potentialities of in the first playthrough. I'm going to talk about that soon, but fire is actually an excellent weapon. Much like the bubble, I didn't appreciate it, although fire's advantages are more obvious, especially since in level 5 you're almost forced to use it. So if you remember my first playthrough, you might recall there's a little bonus here that we should not miss out on. It's still here. Nice one-up. This game, while there are some advantages to dying and going back through levels, does have one thing in common with more difficult games, which is accumulating a stockpile of lives by having no game overs is very helpful. On the other hand, if you keep having game overs, you'll only have 3 lives every time you come back. And in some levels, that's a big handicap because there aren't many one-ups within the level itself. Or as we'll see in the next one, they may not be worth getting. So now we're on ground floor of the Japanese inn. And we ask some guy to get our drinks, which looks like just beer. It's funny, I would think they would live it up a little more on their big overtime vacation. But the Japanese like beer. They're very fond of Asahi Super Dry. And
Interesting.
Kirin. Lots of stuff in Sapporo. My dad's a fan of Japanese beer. But there's a news reporter here, actually, who's reporting on work falling from the sky. What a coincidence. Actually, it's not a coincidence at all. It's because it's the same thing. So yeah, the cat guy answers the phone. So yes, such a thing does in fact exist. The work-producing machine.
As the work is done.
Which may be never, the way things are looking. So next up is an area that was a turning point in the original playthrough, and that's also true here, which is the Hekichi Plateau. But first, we're going to take a little break. Have a nice coffee break.
Pun, him saying, "Why so blue?"
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be. Reminds me of the story about the guy who started biting his pillow while he was sleeping, and his friend said, "Hey, why so down in the mouth?"
Har har har.
Har har. I have now fulfilled my quota of one dad joke per Let's Play. Anyway, so just like the last playthrough, because it's a cold place we're going to, we get our jacket, which is pretty sweet. Basically, it's the equivalent of a gray heart from Binding of Isaac. Or anything. There's been a lot of games with this mechanic. It's just a hit that we don't get to win back with hearts. It's a one-time heart. So, I love this part. We actually spawn in the middle of a huge snowdrift. You can't even see yourself when you spawn. And I lose my jacket immediately because I'm dope.
Oh well.
Yeah, it was good while it lasted. I'm also forgetting here to equip the flame, which really, whether you're on normal mode or hard mode, you should use the flame for this entire level. There's no reason not to.
Yeah.
The flame? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, does the flame gain range when you level it up?
Yes, it does. And that's an important consideration. It came into play while I was doing my no upgrade run. There was actually one point in the game where I literally could not damage a boss with any of my weapons because none of them had enough range. Like, I was doing piddling amounts of damage. Like, one shot would reach them, like 2 damage every second. And that was the point when I actually decided I needed to upgrade something. So I decided to upgrade the bubble, and that's when I realized that the bubble was a really good weapon for that boss. So, it's funny how limitations can lead you to an appreciation of things you never knew before. It's like a growth experience for me, It was really enlightening.
The Silent Hill philosophy. The design of Silent Hill was based on technological limitations.
No, not technological limitations. Gameplay.
I know, but it's a similar concept.
So, this section killed me so many times the first time I played through the game. I had never really gotten the hang of taking little hops. And so I would keep leaping into the pits. Or I would, hop and then accidentally use my jetpack, which propelled me into a pit.
Oh, wow.
That area looks easy when you're going through it. I mean, it's not like I make it look easy. It just looks easy. Mm-hmm. But it is actually harder than it looks. Speaking of things that are harder than they look, we have a section with a lot of these guys. And remember that these guys blow you backward. So you have to be very careful in this section. It's very easy to die. This is another... What made this place hellish on my first playthrough, and it really was just awful, was the fact that there are so many pits in this section.
Yeah.
I probably died completely, necessitating a complete redo through the whole level. 4 or 5 times the first time I played through overtime mode. It was frustrating. It never got to the point of tedious. Oh dear. Here's another area where you can make little mistakes like that. This jump, again, is a little harder than it seems. Generally speaking, it's better to leap onto this thing when it's on the way up, because then your progress will be arrested.
Yeah, the frequency of those icicles.
Yeah, that's another thing that's increased in hard mode. Here is one of the, trolliest one-ups in the entire game. I managed to get that on my first run-through, but that's a little misleading, because that was almost a perfect jump. It's very easy to hit your head and fall, and generally speaking, you're far more likely to go above it when you make a successful jump My advice, if you miss it the first time, do not go back for it, because you're far more likely to fall to your death trying to get to it. So here's an enemy that we saw at the end of the first game, but now it's starting to appear in level 5. Those big blobs that shoot out little blobs. You might also remember that was actually the final boss of Pink Hour. I also just barely get rid of that snowflake in time. Another interesting aspect of this design we just saw is needing to jetpack jump onto an ice platform, which means that you skid really hard. Basically, you have to jump almost instantly after landing on a platform in that way.
Oh boy.
So yeah, this room's a little different.
Note the falling icicles in the hard version.
Exactly. That is something different. Notice also the ice on either end, which makes it harder to stay in one place. Yep, this is a little different. Actually, though, as you just saw, the icicles don't stick around for the boss fight. However, these giant Potaboos do.
Oh!
I am really playing badly here. I do not think I deserve to win this, and I'm pretty sure I don't.
I thought the icicles were gonna continue falling.
To be honest, that would be easier than the little Potaboos. I'm just gonna keep calling them that because I like them. No, if these little things fell, you could just stay in the middle, which with the quad shot would not be too difficult. Oh, jeez, got hit by the snow there. I thought originally that snow was an insta-kill, which would kind of make sense since it's a heavy thing that's falling on you, but I'm glad that's not it.
Yeah.
I also don't know why I'm using the laser here. The quad really is a better choice for this, and honestly, the flame is probably even better.
I was wondering about the flame.
The flame is a good choice here. The flame is pretty much a good choice for everything in level 5. Like I said, whether it's hard mode or not. So you remember this guy's pattern, I think. He will just hop from one of these locations to another. He'll shoot out the little guys every time, and then whenever he turns red, it means that he's going to drop to the ground and try to, you know, hit you. But honestly, one of the easier bosses in the game. In hard mode, possibly the easiest boss in the game. So we managed to get past it.
Because he didn't seem that easy. I guess I was going to say the first boss, but I guess he was actually kind of hard.
No, he was difficult. Remember, I got down to 1 heart in that fight.
Yeah.
Part of the reason is, with this guy, you've already had the chance to get a lot of upgrades, whereas in the first boss, I hadn't gotten almost any upgrades. I had 3 hearts, so that's part of it. So I don't upgrade the flame here, which is a big mistake. Would have saved me a lot of trouble, actually, because I am going to give a little spoiler for this video. I do not manage to beat the boss of this level in this video. We are going to cut after this directly to level 6. And I'm sorry about that, but the time that I finally managed to beat the boss, I was unable to start OBS recording when I defeated it. So I had to sort of, you know, make do the way things are. And I was not going to go through an entire playthrough of this game again to do this level. Because I had enough trouble playing through this level to get the footage you're seeing right now.
Yeah, it happens.
Anyway, here we have a little tough jump to reach an optional chest, which is nice. If I was smart, I would realize this was a sign that I should upgrade something, but I'm not. I really do play kind of dumb in this video. It's embarrassing. The thing is, level 4 went really smoothly, and it's almost like this is my making up for how easy I had it in level 4. Because I cannot think of a playthrough I had of this level that was more stressful than this run-through of this level. Even other run-throughs of this level weren't as bad. So, one of the biggest changes between the original game and this. In the original game, when the wind started blowing, it blew you to the left, which meant it was arresting your progress. But that's easier than what it's doing now, which is pushing me forward when I don't want to go. And also throwing these, you know, jumping things at me.
Yeah.
And basically it is pushing me into pits. If you do not time your jumps extremely carefully, you will mess up. Your momentum will get thrown off. But the thing about this section is, it's pretty much equally easy in this section to either fall off a pit to your death, or to be hit so many times by all this stuff falling from the sky that you just die from losing all your hearts. I don't often die in this game from losing all my hearts. It's usually from falling in a pit. But I died a lot of times in this section from just getting hit. It's also very stressful. You know, the music completely stops. The sound of the effect of the wind is really intense. It's it's one of the most psychologically overwhelming parts of the entire game, even more so than the last 2 levels. I don't know why that is. I would almost say that in both the original game and the hard mode, level 5 is harder than the last 2 levels. It's a curious decision, and I'm not entirely sure why it was made. I did notice, though, in this playthrough, something that I had not noticed in the original run-through that I did, which is this little bonus area, which has a bonus shop, and a little guy who basically gives you congratulations. It's a little pot of tea there.
Here's to a hard day's work.
Yeah,
is
no
it
frickin'
tea
kidding.
or sake? I guess
That's tea. No, sake is served in small cylindrical cups.
Oh,
usually
yeah.
white. That's a teacup and a teapot. Also, there would be a bottle if there was sake.
Mm-hmm.
It was weird. I was looking up something in sake the other day, and it said sake is best served at room temperature, which was weird to me, because I thought it was best served hot. But, you know, go figure. Anyway, here's another tough section of this game. Sorry, this level, I should say. Several of these blocks, these ice blocks in here, are either illusory, or more likely, based on the nature of the game, they're in the foreground or something. So you're not actually jumping on them. And if you think that's bad, we're going to see something a lot worse near the end of this Let's Play. Yeah, in case you didn't know, Zangyo is not going to be the end of this Let's Play. There's more afterwards.
Side...
Yes?
Sorry, side note. I was just looking at Wikipedia. Apparently, in the Japanese language, the word sake, which translates as liquor and can refer to any alcoholic drink,
That is
while
correct.
what we call sake as Nihonshu, or Japanese liquor.
Yeah, that's right. For instance, sake, because it's made out of rice and is very strong, it kind of has a rough taste. When the Japanese want to drink something sweet, they're far more likely to drink plum wine or something like that.
Mm-hmm. I had heard of plum wine.
Mm-hmm. These are some tough jumps, by the way. I was going to say tough drinks. My mind's all mixed up. The Japanese actually have special cups for drinking either sake or some other form of liquor when the moon is out. They call them moon viewing cups. And they have moon viewing sake. Yeah, it's interesting. And appropriate for the level we're in, since there's a very prominent view of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if the moon is shown in the regular playthrough of this game. I think it is. Anyway, here we're starting to get some really tough platforming, because you need to start taking advantage of the... you need to start recognizing the ice as a mechanic, and these very small platforms. Now this game is starting to remind me of Tower of Heaven. I don't know if you remember us going through that.
Oh, yeah!
Remember that game?
I can see
Yeah, that was a great game. Very simple, very short, but in some ways, kind of reminds me of this game, to be honest.
Side note, in 1904, during the Russo-Japanese War...
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, this is a citation needed, so I can't swear to the accuracy of this. But supposedly, the government banned the home brewing of sake because the taxes off it made up 30% of government revenue.
Very interesting.
Like I said,
I was going to say, by the way, before we
citation
get into this,
needed, so take that with a grain of salt.
that thing we saw in the other room is a new type of enemy. That thing that looks like a giant closet.
Interesting.
And it shoots out those little pustules. But another thing that I was reminded of by what you just said, you mentioned that the government wanted people to, buy regular sake instead of making it at home. Did you know that for a long time it was illegal for people to grind their own grain at home?
Interesting.
Because the lord that your property was on, he had a right to have your grain ground in his mill. And basically by not doing that, you were interfering with his rights. So, this boss. I don't know if you remember him from the original playthrough. He was tough in that game, he's even tougher here. If I had only known back then what I know now, I would have known to use the flame against this guy, and to have upgraded earlier. The flame completely takes this guy apart. The laser isn't bad, but the flame is much better. Another thing is this guy just moves a lot faster in this version, which means it's much easier for him to squish you against the wall, which was a danger in the original playthrough, but something that wasn't too hard to avoid. In this...
It's much worse.
It's bad. When you get into the second phase also, this boss gets just very diabolically tough. One thing you may have already noticed that makes him harder is that instead of the shots he shoots out going straight, they now follow you. They move around to try to track your location. That alone is probably responsible for a great deal of the increased difficulty. Because honestly, the guys he drops from the ceiling are very similar. There's not much change there. One thing that was annoying in the original game and is still annoying here is that these tendrils come out in random directions and you really can't predict where they're going to go, but if they run into you, they will damage you.
Oh, yeah.
So I do not do well against this guy. To be honest, I probably had a chance if I had played a little smarter and known to use the flame. But as things are, I get caught in kind of a loop of, bad decision-making.
Oh, well.
I'm going to go through it all, because I think it's important to show the failure along with the success. And also, I think it's interesting to demonstrate the effect this can have on your gameplay when you start to fail a lot. By showing you how I play through the regular levels in this game after the demoralizing experience of losing against this boss.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting. Basically, after losing to this guy, I try to get back, and I don't even get close to getting back to the level. Like, I can't even make it through the level after this boss has beaten me so thoroughly. That's how badly I was beaten.
Yeah. Well,
but oddly enough,
live systems are kind of a bitch in general for that reason.
They are, although I think in this game it's called for. One thing I forgot is that the guys from last round don't disappear when you go to the next round, so if you don't clear them out, they'll stick around. In other words, if you keep, dodging around the upper area, you'll end up with a floor full of these guys, and you'll land on them and get hurt.
Interesting.
You may have already observed why this guy's behavior makes the flame a much better choice, because the flame covers a wide spread and also does damage quickly. It basically shares the advantages of the quad shot with the laser. It's sort of like a little bit of both, but that's what you need here. I keep using the laser, not realizing that a little bit of spread would be beneficial. This was another run where I had a good chance, but I think this is the one where I get squashed. This guy's behavior can be a little distracting sometimes. That's part of it. There's another boss quite like that in the... I was going to say in level 6, but actually it's not in level 6 in the hard mode. It was only in level 6 in the easy mode. That was a little annoying. There was no way I could even lift my gun, and so the enemy just fell right on me. That wasn't fair. To be fair, though, you could argue I shouldn't have let myself get pinned in the corner. That's part of it. And that's the end. I have one more shot at this, and naturally, from what I've said, and the fact that the video's not over, you can tell this doesn't work.
Yeah.
Are there any bosses in Dark Souls where you had an experience like this?
Yes.
Tell me about it. Help it ease my pain.
The Undead Chariot was kind of one of those.
What's that from?
Or the Executioner's Chariot.
Is that from the original Dark Souls?
Dark Souls 2.
Ah.
From original Dark Souls, I had an experience like this with Gwyn when I didn't know to, essentially you could, basically pillar cheat with him.
What is that? What do you mean?
So there's one large...
Oh, look at this. He traps me. This guy knows what's up. He assassinated me.
Yep.
So this is what happens when you die in overtime mode. This is the one excuse I have to show this. When you die, he asks, should we give up and go to the hot spring? If you say yes, you can, get there, but then the boss will chew you out for going when your work isn't done, and you get a game over. Sorry, you were saying about the boss.
Yeah, so there's... In, the arena for Gwyn Lord of Cinder...
Yeah.
There's a fairly large, pillar on the left side of the room.
Yeah.
And you can use that and maneuver around it to give yourself a lot more breathing room.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the guy basically just doesn't give you, any time to,
So did you see what just happened there?
recover or drink Estus or anything like that.
I was so thrown off that I didn't even make that original jump. And that is a tight jump, but there's really no
Yeah.
excuse for that. It shows you how just, like, furious, like, shaking with rage I was, that I couldn't really do normal stuff. I didn't,
Oh, yeah.
It took me a while to realize that this run was just truly, like, done for, and I should go away from the game, calm down a little,
Oh,
get
yeah.
back to it. I eventually did get through it. You know, a lot of people talk about the Let's Player curse, where sometimes, you know, performance anxiety, the fact that when you're really stressed about something, you sometimes flub stuff. Sometimes that you would ordinarily do very well, like you do well in practice, and then the real thing, you're not so good. And I definitely think that applies with this game, that when I am just playing through, I'm willing to take risks and be a little more adventurous, and oftentimes that's actually what's called for in order to get through everything successfully.
Uh-huh.
This is one of those games where being timid can actually trap you. And in that case, just foolhardiness. That is probably the single most difficult jump in the entire game, I'm just going to say. You need to make a short hop to get over there, and then immediately you need to make a full, like, jetpack jump in order to get over to the guy, because he starts blowing immediately. And once you've gotten onto that tiny 1 pixel tall platform, I mean, you can see it right here, you need to jump immediately, because he will blow you right off it, and there's no way to recover. You'll notice he like aggroes as soon as you hit that tiny platform.
Uh-huh.
There's no way to stay on it. You have to jump on it and jump right off. So here, briefly, I feel like the game's taking pity on me, but it's not. It's just making the final blow all that more depressing. Softening me up.
At least you've still got your cash.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's one thing that's a saving grace. But it didn't make a big difference with the boss. I do think I bought one more heart before facing him. It might have helped a little bit. But you saw how quickly I was losing health in some of those final run things.
Yeah.
It really is just a case of getting stuck in an unwinnable situation sometimes. One thing about that boss is, when you're doing damage to him, you do a lot of damage very quickly. Because those little boils that he has, if you train the laser or the fire on him, you'll do like a fifth or a fourth of his health bar in very short order. The problem is that there's such a long gap between times when you're able to damage him, because he spins his weak points around so quickly, and he only has one active at a time. So, in other words, it's just kind of difficult to get to the point where you're fighting him. If you can get him into that vulnerable state 3 or 4 times, you've already won.
Yeah.
That's entirely the question of it. It's not a battle of attrition. In that boss, more so than any other boss in this game, I would say, it's a question of you're either doing really well against him, or you're not getting him at all.
Yeah.
That's the tough part. So I decided to soothe myself a little bit by getting my favorite weapon. It's terrible against this boss, which is something I ought to have considered, but, you know, whatever.
Oh, well.
This was more therapeutic than anything else. Frankly, at this point, this Let's Play is therapeutic, because it's not like you're going to see any progress for the rest of this.
Oh, well. It happens.
Yeah. But you'll see, we don't have much left here. I'll say quite frankly, that part where the wind starts blowing, that is where this thing finally ends. Where I finally take a good hard look at this Let's Play and say, what am I doing here? I have a question, actually. Would you be interested at all in seeing a run of this game made with, like, minimal weapons? Either regular mode or hard mode?
Sure.
I'll have to think about that. It might not be worth it to do anyway. Maybe I shouldn't have asked.
Maybe an easier self-imposed challenge, but it would be kind of interesting to see you do a self-imposed challenge run.
Alright, I'll consider it. I'll try to work out how I could do that. And still make it interesting. Best way would probably be alternate weapons. This game, even though it has a very small roster of weapons, it's surprisingly complicated in how it encourages you to use them. So, I'm on 2 hearts. You probably already tell how this particular life ends. It ends with pain.
Yep.
I mean, look at that setup. How do you get past that?
Rage quits.
No, I'm gonna die for real before I rage quit, and the reason will be a bad jump.
Yep.
I'm just completely thrown off. So now, that's it. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
We will
everybody.
see you next time when I actually manage to do something right. Bye.
Oh, don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah.